Here is a handy book. Alright, this is 2006, I think it was. Marvel did these daft handy books to cover decades. But every problem you can imagine they could make, they end up making. Cover is by John Buscema, that is Sal Buscema's living brother. And it is a reference to the famous Jason Byrne handy book covers. And just like back in the 80s... Oh no, it doesn't. They didn't even go all in with the idea. So this is covering things specific to the 80s at Marvel. And if you can think of your favourite things from the 80s at Marvel, they are likely not in here. Because I truly suspect that the 80s and 90s handy books were deliberately trying to make those eras look shitter than they were. Why else would you open with this? They didn't used to look like this, did they? The handy books. The 80s handy books. They really didn't gan all in on anything. This was the one decade where the handy books existed already, and the cover was a reference to that, but the interior contents sure are not. Also, we have low quality scans of the handy books providing most these fucking headshots. And we're not even doing the fucking table chart with them in like they did in the 80s. Oh, yesterday I forgot another nostalgia series Marvel are doing. They are doing, I shit you not, a Secret Wars nostalgia series. But not the comic, no. A Secret Wars action figure nostalgia series. When you think of the 80s at Marvel, do you think of dreadful Luke Cage's and Iron Fist stories, where there was a Captain Marbles, the real one, Biffy Baston, rip-off who was dying of cancer and beat Iron Fist to death, and then was retconned into never being an actual character? Captain Marbles, the real one, Monica Rambeau, a single page. She is as important as this. You might have noticed now, there's not a profile for Captain America. They could have done a profile for John Walter's Captain America. That's the 80s. No, spend 2 pages on this dimension from about 9 issues of Hulk instead. Let's have some real talk right here. Crystar or Christar? How do you say it? I thought it was Crystar for ages. I reckon Crystar is a better name. But yeah, he's made out of crystal, so it's probably Christar. But Crystar is a much better name. This is a 70s character. He was in an 80s Hulk story, but grouping him in with the 80s is lying. Character who is in 2 issues of Alpha Strike here, getting the same amount of real estate as Monica Rambeau, getting 100% more of the pages than Captain America or Hulk or any other character who had some radical changes in the 80s that are not reflected in this. Defenders, should say New Defenders really, because that is what is pictured, and just a page full of text. No images. We get 1 picture of the New Defenders. The cover to issue 125. Thing I only know about because of handy books. Dup 7. Again, we saw this with the Defenders. We don't have the little chart list thing showing the characters like we did on the Avengers profile. Here, you get 1 picture and then 2 pictures on the right of characters who are not in that 1 picture. If the handy books were this disappointing in the 80s, they would not have been revived in the noughties. I think this is a kid from Spider-Man Oki, the graphic novel Spider-Man Oki. I don't know. They don't even list the artist for the art featured, which would give me a clue. It's the famous 80s Fantastic Force by Simon Waltonson. You know, the run that ran from 1990 to 1991. Classic 80s run, that. I love this picture of the team, but it is disingenuous and incorrect to have this in the 80s Handbook when the 80s Fantastic Force team was Jason Byrne with She-Hulks. Or since this Handbook is a pile of piss that takes the 80s to mean whatever was the last thing in the 80s, then the Steve Engeltine squads. To be fair, they are pictured on the second page. Jason Byrne's team, which was the majority of the 80s, and She-Hulks, not pictured anywhere. Shogun Warriors, never read it. Considered throwing in the towel here and abandoning looking at this Handbook, because at first I thought this was a poorly formatted double-page entry for some absolute Christopher Clairvoyant shit. But I only thought that because of the lack of any images on the second page of Shogun Warriors. Hercules Man, not even the in-continuity Hercules Man. Not even a profile for Hercules Man. It is a profile for an alternative future which is named as if it is a profile for Hercules Man. I really don't know who pissed in my cornflakes lately, but I'm really in a sour mood and irritable. I've nothing against Luke Cages and Iron Fists, but seeing them have a profile when they debuted in the 70s, while prominent 80s characters like Beta Ray Cyrus, Coke and Pepsi, Rouge, Powder Puff Pack, Extra Factors, even Beyond a Man. There's a Serpent League of America, there's Taylor Swift, there's Ob Gobbler, Rachel Fenix, Elliot Pride, Emma Frosties, Speedy Balls, Venom, West Coast Avengers. Right, I've got to cut that down. I did about 50 names there. 50 names of characters that, by rights, should be in this Handbook, but are not. And Iron Man is annoying too. The two main things that are 80s Iron Man are either Roddy Rhodes as Iron Man, or Robert Downton Abbey Jr. in his Silver Centaur armour. And this stands for the armour that he was wearing for the few months at the end of 1989. But the two actual 80s Iron Man things get the equivalent of footnotes. We are really fucking pushing the notion that very little important happened in the 80s. I respect the crew who worked on these 2000s Handybooks. I think they were doing the best they could, and by the end of its life cycle, their Handybooks were good. But I really do believe that this and the 90s one were mandated to not actually reflect the 80s and 90s, and instead discreetly try to suggest that these decades were a fat load of nought. What do I call this character? Have I given him a name? He's called Tom Petty anyway. The character that would be Lobo from stories in 1975 through to 1979. Captain Britain went through some big changes in the 80s, with David Allen's redesigning them, and Albert Moore completely reinventing them, and then there is Excalibur. But let's instead do a bad guy from the black and white Darth Knight serial that only ran in Britain. New Muties, And Reese, they list the members as of the final issues of 1989, but they didn't depict half of them anyway. The Extra Factors kids, Time Bomb, Sphincter, Skid Marks, Fire Fists, R.I.P. Fire Fists. No pictures of them anyway. My theory that they are trying to insult the 80s would have more legs if they included a lot more of the new universe. Dakota Johnson over here, she came back in the noughties in Daredevil comics. She was, and presumably still is, hot. Nuki! Awful amount of wasted space on either side of the image. And I don't know how they can take a character with 2 appearances and give him a profile as long as Captain Marbles, the real one, Monica Rambeau. More new universe. Fabio Nicieza wrote this one. I never read it. If someone thinks I'll like it, let us know. But I read a bunch of new universe, and other than Dup 7, didn't like any of it. Rocky Raccoon, again, introduced in the 70s, but he did have a mini-series in the 80s to at least justify including him here. Why isn't there a profile for Etrigan the Demon in here? He had a mini-series in the 80s. And he was introduced in the 80s, 1981. Completely valid character to include in this. Scourge. I think I might have said this before. I was meant to be saying his name wrong, but I forgot. For ages, I thought his name was Scourge. That is what I should be saying his name as. But the idea was that I would call him Scourge, like the Thor character, and Scourge, Scourge. But then I realised all along, Scourge isn't a word. Look, it is November 1979 She-Hulks. Not the 80s version. A character very, very well catered to and defined in the 80s. No, let's reflect her debut with Torn Pyjamas from 1979. She only gets a page in all. Spaceman's from Ron Spaceman, sans Ron Spaceman, who they cannot depict. Spider Pig, Spider-Man. Or was this Spider-Man Oki? I don't know. I've not read these profiles through before this. That would take fucking ages. But this might be Spider-Man Oki. A Daredevil bad guy that I really don't remember. You know an important Daredevil enemy who was introduced in the 80s? Thyroid Mary. Actually, Electro was... She was 1981, wasn't she? Both of those are way, way, way more important and reflective of the 80s than some guy from issues in between Hank Miller stories. Thor. There is that classic 80s Thor look that, you know, might as well be traced from the Silver Age. We also have pictures of Frog Thor and Armoured Thor. This is piss. If the Lobo profile didn't whet your appetite, more rubbish stuff from late 70s Defenders here. Wolfman. I suppose he was big in the 80s. He did have his miniseries and his ongoing. But it feels like Wolfman and Spider-Man, they are here to sell a book that probably wasn't going to sell based on the appearances of Wolfman or Spider-Man anyway. Simon Waltonson introduced and revamped so many iconic Thor bad guys. Here is that dumb serial killer guy from the run before Simon Waltonson. They didn't include a profile for the girl, the lead character, in Spellbound, but have a profile for some other character in it. Off-page profiles, arbitrary when they gave Zaniac a full-page one. I don't get this. They didn't give a profile to Taylor Swift, but they have a profile for one of her supporting characters. These are... and her fucking sister. These are very bottom of the barrel, purposely picked to again make it seem like nothing was happening in the 80s. This Andy book has annoyed me with every page. I don't think this is the worst Andy book they ever made. The Age of Armageddon one holds that honour. But these Decade Celebration ones were not good. Just dawned on me, there are characters on the cover that are not in here. Firestart, she isn't in here. I don't know who that is below Cannonballs. Iron Man is in his Silver Centaur costume. Wolfman is in his Tiger Stripe costume. I don't recommend this. It's not fun. Its main talent is aggravating you. I rate it 7 thumbs up tight.